Bill Carroll of Nuts and Bolts Sports and Zenny62 Media, and turning our attention, as we mentioned, to the NFC North. We've plowed through all the teams but one, and that, of course, is the Minnesota Vikings, who are a team that has, once again, a team at a crossroads. They have made some changes, so they've switched from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense. That means that Harrison Phillips is now a defensive end instead of a tackle. Dalvin Tomlinson, who came by the Giants' days of tackle, plays the nose. Armon Watts, once again, still remains either a tackle or five-tech, whatever you want to call him, but he'll be on that front. And then you're standing up Zadarius Smith, who's done that before. Daniel Hunter goes from being a defensive end to an outside linebacker. And they have Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks on the inside. Patrick Peterson. So, everyone's sort of assuming they're going to take a corner at some point fairly early in the class, but I wouldn't be surprised if they wait until the second round to see who's still there for them. Harrison Smith, still very good, but they're probably looking eventually for his replacement. Cameron Bynum is free safety. Cameron Dantzler is the other corner, and they have Chris Boyd backing him up. As I said, Peterson and Nate Hairston, as well as Harrison Hand, are also guys that will play there, and some of them will play some nickel. And then Shandon Sullivan, and I'm a big fan of Perry Nickerson. I think this is going to be sort of a breakout year for Perry Nickerson. Their offense is actually pretty solid. Like we sometimes underestimate, I think, the total amount of talent. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is one of the great young rising stars at wide receiver. You still have Adam Thielen, who's not exactly old, but is clearly getting towards the end of his prime. KJ Osborne is an emerging slot with Imar Smith-Marset and Myra Mitchell behind him. You have Jan Cena and Tristan Jackson, as well as Blake Prohl, who I think will also see some time in the slot, and Olabisi Johnson, who plays essentially everywhere in their various 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. Then you have Christian Darrisaw, of course, who was just drafted a year ago. And if he can stay healthy and if he can be productive, that helps them a lot. They have a player I really like, probably more than most people, in Ezra Cleveland, who I think could play right tackle if they needed him to, but he's right now playing left guard. They have Garrett Bradbury, another one of the better young centers in the game. I think they want to upgrade their guard position. Oyudo, Wyatt Davis are playing behind Jesse Davis. They've also got Brian O'Neill, who's a very good right tackle. And then Timon Paris. They have an interesting group of tight ends. I think they're going to draft a tight end at some point, but Irvin Smith Jr. I think he is what he is at this point. Johnny Munt, I think we'll see some time in 2 tight end sets. They also have Ben Ellefson and Zach Davidson. Davidson is another one of those former high school quarterbacks, played a little bit of pro baseball. There's 3 or 4 tight ends, like James Casey. There's a bunch of guys. They were high school quarterbacks. They played pro baseball for a little while. I think he was also a great punter, right? Davidson was a great punter when he was in college as well. He's a move tight end type, but I think they want a full-size tight end. I wouldn't be shocked if pick 46 brings them, if they have the opportunity to draft one of the. They still might have the choice of tight ends. There might not be a tight end off the board before 46. That means they might have a shot at any of them, right? They might have a shot at McBride. They might have a shot at Dulcich. They could probably even wait on. So there's a bunch of good tight ends in this class, and obviously Jelani Woods feels like a good fit for them as well. They're set at running back pretty much between. Obviously Dalvin Cook occasionally has injury concerns, but Madison's a very good backup. They have Kenny Waganu and AJ Rose. It's a good group. So, getting to their cap situation, touching on it briefly, they have about a little over $22 million in dead money tied up. A lot of it in Anthony Barr, right? Almost half of it. 9.8 of that. Over $22 million is him. Michael Pierce is $4 million. Kyle Rudolph is almost $2.9 million. Jeff Gladney, I was a big fan of yours, Jeff Gladney. 2.76. Well, 2.776. Almost a little over 2.3. A little over two and $3/4 million tied up in him. Sheldon Richardson is almost 1.3 million of it. Britton Colquitt, 716,668. The aforementioned Zach Davidson, 226. Virtually nothing. 226,329. So it looks like they're not bringing him back. And I think he could land somewhere and, like I said, be productive. And then Drew Samia, Another one of those Stanford guards, 184. I think Stanford. No, another guard, 284,985,000. So those guys are virtually nothing. Most of it is Pierce and Barr. Pierce and Barr are by themselves over 2/3 of that cap hit, which leaves them $12,204,750 in cap space. I don't think they're done moving on from some of their older players, and the draft will, I think, spur another round of cuts or settlements or trades or whatever it is. But just looking at the rest of their draft needs and the rest of their draft picks, they have picked 12 overall, which is likely a corner, unless they really like. I mean, there's no guard. I think they would take that early. There's a pass rusher they might take that early. If Jermaine Johnson makes it to them at 12, I think that's probably the pick, and then they'll probably look at corner with that pick at 46 if they don't go corner with that first pick. So some of the players that I think they would consider, I mean, obviously, if either Gardner or Stingley made it to them, they'd be thrilled if either one of those things happened. If that doesn't happen, I think they'll consider people like, I think it's a little early for Jordan Davis, but they could consider, I mean, Andrew Booth, maybe a tiny bit early, but I think they'd at least consider him. Could they go linebacker? Maybe. I think it's a little early for any of the linebackers, quite frankly. So I think they would either trade down, and it's teams who would want that 12th pick, I believe. But if they don't trade down, then I think what they end up doing is picking one of those players I just mentioned, and then moving on to 46, they could address pass rush. A guy like Boye Mafe. A lot of people trying to push him towards the first. I don't see a first rounder when I watch him. I think they might consider even a guy like, if Jalen Petre's there at 46, I think they sort of run to the podium to make that pick, as they say. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked to add even to their pass rush. Now, Arnold Bikiti is another guy that, like Daniel Hunter, like some of the guys they have currently, was essentially a defensive end in his time before, but they would stand him up in their current situation. And last but not least, a guy I think who play 5-tech for them, if he's there at 46, is DeMarvin Leal. And I know some of the bloom is off the rose for DeMarvin Leal, but I think he's a really good football player. And, very, very, very sort of poor combine showing aside, there are teams that'll like him, even maybe towards the late part of the first, but I think somewhere in the first half of the second, that's where he goes. Looking at a few other positions of need, and they're a team that doesn't have desperate needs except for a couple positions, but as I mentioned before, I think they want to upgrade tight end. I think they want to upgrade guard. I think they want to upgrade or at least get younger at both corner and safety. And of course, you never have enough depth at those two positions, the corner and safety, because even if you don't get hurt, there's going to be a situation where you're going to put more guys on the field, and you don't want there to be a big drop-off when you put more defensive backs on the field. Other players that I think they might possibly target as we sort of walk through those positions of need. Even if they're looking further down, in some of those later rounds, as mentioned before. So, at pick 77, this is where I think they might go guard shopping. And there should be some really good guards still on the board at that point. Amongst them that I think might be in consideration, and once again, I think they could add other positions. A guy like Sawyer is probably gone, but if he's somehow still there, oh yes. Cole Strange and Ed Ingram are guys that, if they're there, I think they would seriously consider. If Dylan Parham is there, if Chris Paul is there. Now, some of these guys may be gone, but one of them should probably make it. Sean Ryan is a guy that can probably play, we talked about guys who could have position versatility, can play guard or tackle, but I think he might be a pick if he's there at that point. And then with some of their other picks, and even Abraham Lucas as well might be a guy they might snap up, though he's, once again, a guy who's he's a tackle type, but they might either push one of the guys they currently have a tackle inside, or they might experiment with him. But looking at their other picks and guys that I think they would consider. So they got, in the Ndakwe trade, they got pick 156 from the Ravens, and I'll go through both 56 and 184 together, sort of as a package. Players that I think they might be targeting. Now, if either, say a guy like Dominique Robertson makes it to them, he could be gone. But if he's not, I think that's a guy they would look at. If, for instance, Alontae Taylor makes it to them, he could play probably either safety or corner. But if they haven't gotten one already, Zion McCollum is a player that if he somehow made it there, he might be gone. But I think they would consider him. They consider Mario Goodrich. I think they would. If they didn't get a tight end earlier, would they look at a guy like Greg Dulcich if he's there, or Cole Turner? I think they would. Other players that make sense, both in terms of, and Jake Ferguson also would be another tight end if he's on the board at that point. They would seriously consider. Now, going back out to corner, I think Tariq Castro-Fields would be a player they would consider. I think they would also take a look at Cam Taylor-Britt, who has the ability to play both positions. Here's my guy, and I know I've mentioned him on every single video, and I'm going to mention him on every single video because I am such a big fan. If Damari Mathis is there, if you are in the late fourth or even the mid fourth, and you need a corner who's instinctive and tough and smart, or you make it to, if he makes it to fifth, once again, it's one of those like, oh, I'm not saying you've won the draft, but you've won maybe that part of the draft. Damari Mathis from Pitt. I know I keep talking about him. I'm not going to stop. I apologize. I'm apologizing ahead of time. Okay. And then the next pick at 184, if somehow Braxton Jones is still there, I think he'd be in consideration. I think they might consider a guy like Noah Ellis as a pure, inside guy. Timmy Horn from Kansas State is another one of those 0-1 technique types. I think they'd be interested in him. Leon O'Neal at safety. Michael Clemens, who for them is an outside linebacker. Then I think they might also consider if Monteric Brown is there, right? You can always never have too many good corners. Caleb Evans would be a guy they might consider. Jesse Luketa for them would be a stand-up linebacker. And one other D tackle I think they would consider would be a guy like Eric Johnson. In fact, I think they'd be thrilled to get Eric Johnson if he's somehow there at 184. Okay. And then those last couple of picks. 191, 192, I'll do them as a package because it's going to be the same players, whichever ones are available. They got one from the Mike Hughes trade, the other one from the Chris Herndon trade. Players that I would seriously consider if I were them or at that point in the draft. If Matt Waletzko makes it to them, if to that point. If Marquise Bell or Colby Harvell-Peel makes it to them at that point. Even a guy like Derek Tangelo, right? As an interior guy. A safety like Reed Blankenship is a guy you might consider. Sterling Weatherford is either a safety or a linebacker or a little bit of both. I think he'd be a player in consideration. And one of the great names in the draft, right? Smoke Monday would be in consideration, I would believe. And then a few other guys, once again, could be either one of those two picks. If they go late at tight end, James Mitchell, talented but very injury prone in his time at Virginia Tech. I think he'd be in consideration. And Isaiah Polamalu, right? Polamalu is once again, another relative of, it seems like a lot of those Polynesian players are related, but he's, I think, a cousin of Troy Polamalu. He ended up not being quite what people thought he would be in his collegiate career, but there's something to work with there. And then last but not least, Darrell Baker, corner from Georgia Southern. That's shared between 191 and 192. And then the last pick, players that I think might be in consideration at pick 250. Came by way of the Weatherly trade. And once again, we're deep in there. We're in the woods at this point. I get it. But if you go late for tight end, guys like Daniel Imatorbhebhe, right, who is, of course, the younger brother of Josh. Russ Yeast, if you're looking at both Kansas State guys. If you're looking at, that's a safety and a tight end. Other guys that would be in consideration, I think Percy Butler, the safety from Louisiana Lafayette, would probably still be available to you. If you wanted to go guard, Ja'Tyre Carter from Southern University, right? That's a guy I think that might still be available that you might want to consider. Corner Damarian Williams from Houston is a player that I think might be on the table and might be in consideration. And I'll give you one last one. Two more safeties. Trey Sterling from Oklahoma State and Tariq Carpenter from Georgia Tech. So that takes us through some of the players I think should be in consideration for the Vikings, and that ends the AFC North review.